Greetings everybody, my name is Jill Bignolis and I work with Laticrete International, and with me.
Hello, my name is Ryan Freitag and I'm with Raimondi USA.
And today we're going to be talking about the installation, cutting, logistics of installing XL slabs. So we're going to be going over the standards, the installation, everything you guys need to know to get this done correctly the first time. And we'll go over your tools.
Yep.
We'll go over our slabs. We'll go over our thin sets. We'll basically encompass the entire installation according to the installation standard, which is the ANSI 108.19 and 108.20. You ready to get going?
Let's do this.
All right. Oh, by the way, I just want to let you know there is somebody, my guy Tyler is in the back. He's answering QA questions live. So don't hesitate to ask any questions that you have at any points during the webinar. He's going to be back there answering questions the whole time. So don't hesitate to ask as many questions as you need. All right? Okay. Let's get going to it.
Okay.
All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk to you about is first we poured a slab, right? This is something that we did earlier today. The tolerances for installing these big tiles, right? These tiles can be up to 5.5 by 10.5 feet. They require incredibly flat substrates, whether it's on your floor or your wall. And the tolerances are 1/8 and 10. So 1/8 inch and 10 feet is very difficult to achieve. So for that particular purpose, we installed a self-leveling underlayment, which makes it a lot easier for you to achieve those tolerances. Again, 1/8 and 10 is very hard to accomplish. It also can be a 16th and 24 inches. So it's got to be incredibly flat. So give yourself the best chance possible to get that installation correct the first time around by using the correct materials. These types of materials are expensive. They look expensive. They look very luxurious. So you don't cheap out on the installation materials. Your substrate prep is going to be the one thing that determines whether or not that installation is correct or not. So don't cheapen out on the floor or your walls. Make sure everything is plumb and according to the standard tolerances. So on this particular floor that you see here, just because we're working in a studio, we actually poured this on our Hydraband boards to make it nice and light and easier to discard and move around. And we poured our self-leveling material. This is our NXT Plus. So this is a very good material to use. You can go up to 1.25 inches per pour. Here we went to about 1/4 inch or so. And it gave us a really, really nice flat substrate. We put a level to it. We had to move the slab around a little bit, so it's not exactly perfect, but for the instances or for the purpose of this training, we're gonna work with it. As you can see, this is pretty dry, so before we install on top of it, we'll make sure that we'll throw a little water on it so that the substrate isn't too thirsty and doesn't steal all the water from your installation materials. But prior to that, going into too deep into this, let's go into your tools and installation materials.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
So for installing these XL slabs, there is a specific set of tools that are required for these installations. First over here, I'll show you a suction cup rack. So a suction cup rack is a required tool for these installations. This is the Raimondi version. You can see we have 8 suction cups on here. Each one of our suction cups does have a gauge on here. So you have positive confirmation that each suction cup is working and it's going to hold nice and firmly. This rack is also adjustable both widthwise, both lengthwise. It can go in and out as well as widthwise this way. And our crossbars are also adjustable, allowing this rack to adjust to any size and shape of tile that you have. These are all on quick connect. A simple loosen here allows you to move the suction cups into the proper position. Now a suction cup rack is a very important tool. It gives you not only a way to pick these slabs up and move them around the job site, but it also adds a lot of rigidity to the tile. If you were to try to say, if you can see these tiles are rather flexible, if you were to say try to install this without a suction cup rack, if you were to pick this up by the corner, by the time you got it off, the middle of that tile would sag and break. So your suction cup rack is a required tool, as it not only allows you to handle the tools, but adds the rigidity to make installations possible. You can also see that my suction cup rack is hanging off of my A-frame cart. This is an A-frame transport cart. You can see it's a terrific way to hold your rack while it's not in use. And also, you can hold several slabs off the back side of the rack, and therefore you can use the A-frame cart to transport and move full slabs around your installation area.
Now, don't get me wrong, is it required for any slabs over 1 meter square, they have to use the suction cup rack, is that correct?
I believe that is. According to the ANSI standard, a suction cup rack is written into the standard and is a requirement for any tile over 1 meter by 1 meter.
Awesome.
So another tool that we're using today are the Raimondi Bigfoot tables. A work table is another, again, required tool for these installations. The preferred method for cutting these tiles is going to be the score and snap. And in order to get a proper score and snap, we're going to need not only a perfectly flat surface, but also a surface that isn't going to sag and break when you put pressure on them. So this is the new Raimondi Bigfoot tables. You can see this is actually two tables here connected together. So they are made to be transported and set up on the job site. So you have very wide legs. A couple other nice features of these tables you can notice is we do have transport wheels on here. So they're very easy to move around and set up on the job site. You can also see that they come standard with holders for our score and snap rail, which we'll go over in a minute. These Bigfoot tables also have nice wide aluminum slats that are also adjustable. You can slide in and out to adjust to any size tile, and also if you have to do any fabrication, any drilling of holes, you can move your slats out of the way so you won't be damaging your table.
Yeah, the installation of these slabs does require very specific tooling, right? So there is a little bit of an investment when you're talking about the tools, but they are paramount because these tiles are not cheap and you can't just crack one tile by doing it wrong. I've done a lot of these installations, and at some points I did not have a table with me, so we stacked up pallets and try to rig a table together. But as soon as there's a little bit of give or it's not the exact size of the panel, it's not well supported, you'll crack it very, very easily. I mean, this looks like it's about 5.5 millimeters thick, and there are panels out there that are a lot thinner, so they can get very, very brittle. So having the correct toolage for these installations makes the difference, a whole huge difference.
That's
right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Also, we'll go over another required tool for these installations. Jill, would you mind grabbing the other end for me?
Of course.
As I mentioned earlier, the preferred method for cutting these tiles is going to be in score and snap. And this is the Raimondi Razor MK2. So this is a score snap rail. You can see this also comes in two pieces, so it's very easy to transport. Some of the advantages are of the Raimondi Razor. We do have suction cups located directly in the middle of the rail. That means we are mechanically adhering our score and snap rail to the tile, making it nice and firm. And also because our suction cups are directly in the center of our rail, it makes it, it allows us to cut the most narrow piece possible, as well as makes it very, very stable in your score and snap. So score and snap rail is again another required tool for these installations. And in just a few minutes, we'll be going over exactly how to use this tool.
And whenever you're cutting or carrying these panels, these things, if they were to break, they are very, very, very sharp. Always wear safety gloves and safety goggles. Again, safety's first. I've known plenty of guys in the industry who have to quit because they weren't wearing the proper PPEs. They get hurt, and that kind of ruins their whole, gig or career. At this point, they have to move on. So always wear your safety gloves when handling these panels. Always wear your safety goggles or glasses when cutting the panels.
A few more tools that we'll go over real quickly. This here is the Raimondi Lippage system here. Lippage systems are again a required tool for these installations. This is the Raimondi Vitae. A few things on the Lippage systems. Like, as I said, they are a required tool. You can see today we're going to be using the blue one. This is a 1 millimeter. It is very important that your Lippage tuning device is always thinner than your grout joint. We don't want any pressure between the Lippage tuning device and the tiles themselves. So again, remember your Lippage system is always going to be thinner than your grout joint. Also, this is a screw type Lippage system. We also want one with a removable cap. So after you install your Lippage system, if any thin set oozes out or anything, we want a removable cap that we can take off, clean that thin set while it's still wet, and then reinstall it. So always remember, according to the standards, Lippage tuning devices are a required tool for these installations.
Yes, I think for anything over 1 meter by 1 meter square, they are required. One thing I want to mention about that is that the removability of the top cap is incredibly important. As Ryan mentioned, you have to clean those grout joints. Those grout joints, per their standard, have to be a minimum of a 1/16 of an inch, or a maximum of, minimum of a 1/16 of an inch. So about 1.5 millimeters. So it's going to be a little wider than this particular device. But cleaning it while it's still wet is paramount, because how do you guys typically clean the joints? After you've thin setted it down, you wait a little while, it's drying out, and then most people will take a knife and then just rake the joints. In most tile installation, that's totally fine, but for these panels, they are very fragile, they are very long, they're cut very, very sharply, so you could potentially hurt the panel itself. Again, these tiles are not cheap, they're big, they're a pain in the butt to remove from the ground, so make sure you clean out the joints while it's still wet.
Okay. So next I'd like to talk about trowels. So in a standard tile installation, a lot of guys use a square notch trowel, in which when you use a square notch and you set your tile down, you have to shift that tile back and forth in order to collapse those ridges and expel those air pockets from underneath the tile. Well, you can see with this tile, it's very large, very heavy, so once you set this into the thin set, it will not be possible to shift this tile back and forth. So in order to overcome that problem, we've come up with this. We call this the Raimondi flow ridge trowel, otherwise known as a slant notch trowel. So by changing the shape of our thin set ridges, when we comb on a 45-degree angle, our thin set ridges actually come out like this. So when you set the tile on it, the weight of the tile itself collapses those ridges as opposed to the mechanical shifting back and forth. So it's very important to note that in order to install these gauge porcelain panels, these XL slabs, you need to use the proper trowel. And again, today we're going to be using the Raimondi flow ridge trowel.
Yeah, again, to kind of emphasize your point, when you're installing these panels, you're looking on the floor at least 85% coverage. If you're using a 1/2-inch square notch trowel, which is the typical tool used for large format tile installations, like you mentioned, shifting this back and forth to collapse the ridges is almost impossible. So these promote ridge collapse pretty much with just pressure. We're also going to introduce vibration to the system, taking advantage of the thixotropic properties of our installation materials and of our thin sets. So it's very important that, and we'll go over the actual methodology of installation, that you use these trowels the correct way and get the proper coverage. Again, 85% on the floor, 80% on the wall. But the biggest thing is that you want to avoid any voids that are over 2 square inch per square foot of the panel itself. You're not going to see that, through the tile, obviously, but you just want to avoid any kind of voids, because point load, let's say somebody walks on this tile and there's a 6-inch void in there, that heel or that really sharp point load will find that spot and crack the panel. So it is paramount that you use, again, the correct tools and the correct methodology to give yourself the best possible installation. I always tell people, shoot for 100% coverage and see where you get to, but the minimum is 85%.
And again, we're going to achieve our 85% coverage from using the proper trowels, using the proper thin sets with the thixotropic nature, and also our troweling techniques is also proper troweling technique is going to allow you to achieve that 85% coverage.
Correct. And we'll go over that installation once we're done with the cutting. My buddy Robert will come out and actually do a troweling demonstration. He'll trowel out the panel and kind of go over some of the variables that you can control and some of the minutia that you have to pay attention to, because we're not building pianos, this isn't rocket science, but there are a lot of very little details that you have to pay attention to in order for that installation to be as good as possible.
Okay. Yes.
All right.
And also I'd like to point out another tool. As Jill noticed, we do vibrate the edges of all panels that we set. We take advantage of the thixotropic nature of this mortar, and so we're going to introduce vibrations around all 4 edges of every tile that we set, not only on the floor but also on the wall. And to achieve that, we're going to use this. This is the Raimondi E-Fox Filipino right here, and it is a vibration tool. You see it's rather large, so you can cover a lot of square inches very quickly. It also has a nice point right here. This allows us to get in and out of all of our Lippage tuning systems, and vibrate all edges of all the panels, allowing us to get that maximum coverage. You can see also we have a version right here. If you need a smaller vibration tool, you can loosen these screws right here, pop out the center, and now you have a small vibration tool that's going to get into every single nook and cranny that you need.
Oh, that's wonderful. And guys, don't forget, they have a live Q&A. So we have 2 people right now live answering questions on the internet. So please don't hesitate to ask all the questions that you need. Okay. All right.
So that's a quick overview of the tools, and I think we can proceed with a scoring and snapping demonstration on these tiles.
Sounds great.
So when scoring and snapping these tiles, we want to always use our safety glasses and our cut-resistant gloves. Very important that you use that PPE, so these edges can get razor sharp, so you need to use gloves and safety glasses.
Yep. All right, Ryan, this is the one thing I'm actually terrible at, is cutting things. I don't know why, whether it's wood or tile. I am terrible at it, so I will let you take lead on that and show everybody how to do it the right way.
I understand. So the first thing we're going to do, again, this is the Raimondi razor here, and so we're going to line up our tool. This here is our scoring unit. We have a titanium coated carbide wheel with a bearing in the middle. Makes it a very nice scoring unit here. We can tilt it back to disengage, and we tilt it forward to engage. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've previously made a mark on this tile, and I'm going to line my scoring wheel up with the mark, and I'm going to lock this suction cup down. Then I'm going to come to the other side, and I'm going to line this side up with my mark and lock this suction cup down. Always very, very important to come back and double check to make sure that you're still on your mark. As you move this side off, it might move this. So once I verify that I'm on my mark on both sides, I can lock all suction cups down. Now, before I make my score, I want to make sure that my cut is going to be over one of the solid aluminum slats. So Joe, if you wouldn't mind, we're just going to slide this tile back a little bit.
Sure.
Just so that we're over the rail, because I'm going to be putting a fair bit of downward pressure on, and I don't want to score into a void because I can risk chipping the tile. So once I know that I'm on my two marks and I'm over my aluminum rails, I'm going to start about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in. My first move is going to be to back score this way. Then I'm going to move my scoring unit to the end, and I'm going to follow through all the way through to the end of the tile. The most important parts here are going to be speed and pressure. You want to have a good down pressure, so I'm going to put my left hand on and both hands on and give a good hard score all the way down, and then also consistent speed. Once you start, you don't want to stop in the middle of your score because it may snap off your score line.
Is there a certain amount of pressure that you should be putting on, or because you don't want to put not enough pressure and not score it enough?
Right.
If you push too hard, it's going to be bad, right?
Right. It's definitely better to score it harder than soft, but you don't have to put too much weight on it. What you're listening for is, at the end of the day, it is a porcelain tile. So you're listening for that kind of sound of paper tearing as you score that tile. Right, yeah. Again, it's better to have harder pressure than not enough pressure, but you don't have to put all of your weight onto the tile. Okay. So I'm going to start 1.5 inches in, and I'm going to go backwards, like that.
It sounded great.
And you kind of hear that sound of, it sounds like a piece of paper tearing. Yeah. Okay, and that's the sound we're looking for.
Now, if you were to score it, but we're too light on it, can you score back over that?
We don't recommend double scoring. Problem with double scoring is your score lines might be off just kind of a couple of microns, and therefore you have two lines to snap on, and you might get an unsuccessful snap. So we recommend just a single score line. So make sure that your area is clean and that you do a nice, good, solid score line the first time.
Awesome.
Okay, now we can take these suction cups off. If you don't mind, we'll hang this right off the hooks.
Sure thing.
The next step is to use our braking pliers here. This has a little silver knob, and what I'm going to do is, if you wouldn't mind sliding this into this, I'm going to line the silver point up with my score line, and I'm going to slowly apply pressure. Once my tool is engaged, I'm going to slowly apply pressure until I hear a small pop. Okay? That's it right there. I don't know if that mic picked it up, but just a small little pop right there. Then I'm going to come to the other side and do the same thing.
That is where I always get scared. I'm always listening to that ting, and if it doesn't come, I don't know what to do anymore.
So yes, that's the most nerve-wracking part. So this is kind of a 3-step process. I kind of always keep my finger on the side of the panel. I'm also giving a visual inspection, and then I'm listening with my ears as well. So once my tool is engaged, I'm going to slowly add pressure. And I don't know if you picked that up.
I heard it.
I heard that. Now, what I like to do is after I hear that, I just give it a second, and I just kind of give it another little quarter turn. Kind of helps to release a little bit more of that pressure. Okay. After we've done that on both sides, Jill's going to help me. We're going to bring this tile to the edge of the table. We're going to line the score line up with the edge of the table, and we're going to snap it. Okay, now teamwork is very important on this part. It's very important that this tile is always supported in the center, as this can release at any point in time, so we want to make sure that the tile is supported and doesn't fall and break away. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go, I'm going to count on 1, 2, 3, and when we go on 3, we're going to just go a quick downward motion and snap this tile. So are you ready?
Ready.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, look at that. Perfect cut.
There you go.
Beautiful.
Perfect
well
cut.
done.
You set this right on the ground here. Now, the final step in doing a snap, we're going to use our diamond sanding sponge here. This is a way to just kind of finish up this edge. Now, your instinct is going to want to be a little like this. I don't advise that. What we want to do is we want to use the entire face of this diamond pad. If you go like this, you're just going to put a groove in that. You're not going to really use this whole tool. So what we want to do is start here, use the entire face of this pad, and just, I always like to work down. I don't like to come up because you risk chipping the glaze. So we're just going to very softly and gently just go down.
And that dulls the edge a little bit too, so it doesn't make it, takes the sharpness away from it.
I kind of equate this to deburring edge if you are working with wood, or kind of breaking the edge. If you're a woodworker, it's like breaking the edge. If you're a metal worker, it's kind of just like deburring. I'm not trying to shape or anything. I'm just kind of gently running down that edge, taking off any burr. Keep in mind this edge is still very, very sharp. And you can also, the other nice thing about these tiles, they're so well manufactured that even though we scored and snapped this is basically just like a factory edge. So we can still use this edge to butt up against another tile. You no longer have to hide your snapped edges into the corner.
Yeah, one of the good things about the manufacturing process of these XL slabs is that there's no tension built into the tile itself. So they're very predictable the way you can score and snap. When they're manufactured, they're not in a die. They're kind of free to expand and contract as they go through the firing process and the kiln and all that stuff. So they are incredibly flat, and there's no tension into it. It's almost like the perfect tile.
Yes. And I understand what you were saying earlier. I know a lot of people are scared to score and snap these tiles, but again, due to the manufacturing process, they don't have the internal tension, so they are actually quite easy to score and snap. You can see we did that piece with no problem. The other thing about, as you mentioned with the manufacturing process, these tiles are very, very flat. So we can actually achieve a straight 50% offset with these tiles. With most large format tiles, you can never go more than a 33% offset because of the inherent warp. These tiles are extremely flat, so you'll have no problem doing a 50% offset.
Yeah. And just to add to that, because they are so flat and because the tolerances for your substrates are so flat, that allows you to use a huge number of different products, including thin sets, because the inherent bow isn't there, so you don't have to fill that gap in the middle of that tile. So since the bow isn't there, you can use a thin set or an LHT mortar. Okay? All right. Okay. Well, again, please remember, there is somebody answering questions live, so don't hesitate to ask as many questions as you can, and somebody will be answering them live. Okay. All right, let's move on.
Okay, so at this point, our tile is cut to size. We are ready to attach our suction cup rack, and and get ready to apply mortar to both the substrate and the back of the panel. As you can see, we are using vacuum suction, so it is very important that we clean this tile. If you have any dust or any debris on the top of this tile, that could be a bond breaker and cause our suction cups to fail. So it's very important that you clean off the surface of every tile every time.
Yes. I've actually not done that in every installation, and the one time I didn't clean the panel, Robert and I were actually in Anaheim, and as we're transporting the panel in front of 30, 40 people, it just fell right onto the floor. It was an embarrassing moment for me, but it was also a very good learning moment, because since then I have never forgotten to clean that tile again.
Now, I get asked often if we should use water to clean the tile. And what I tell people is if there's a lot of dust on the tile, then yes, it is very important to use water or some kind of solvent to clean that tile. However, once you attach your suction cup rack, the tile has to be dry. If you have any standing water or solvent on there and you attach your suction cup rack, it will work this way, but as soon as you turn that tile vertical, that water will shear the suction cup off. So it's very important to clean the tile. If your tile is very dirty, you can use water or some kind of solvent to clean it, but when you attach your suction cup rack, you need to make sure that your tile is dry in order for your suction cups to work.
Yeah, water is always going to be a bond breaker. Just like you can't have a puddle of water on your substrate, thin set will not stick to water. So you always want to make sure that it is damp but dry, no standing water at all.
Okay.
Right?
I think we're ready, so if you don't mind, Joe, we'll help out. I do at this point want to take off our black covers off of our suction cups, so that will allow us to attach this to the rack, to the tile.
Now this is the exercise where teamwork and coordination becomes very important. The handling of the tile and carrying the tile on these, really well designed and engineered racks, they're almost perfect, but not really. So if I was to move the panel and Ryan's not moving at the same time as I am, we could potentially twist the panel and crack it. So that's when coordination and eye contact and just communicating with your partner and make sure that everything is done at the same time.
Okay, so we'll pick it up on 3.
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Oh.
There we go.
So are we trying to get this as centered as possible?
Yes. So placing the suction cup rack on these tiles, a few things to consider. Number one, I want my aluminum rails inside the tile. And the reason for that is if I were to, say, install this tile next to a wall and this aluminum rail is sticking out past the tile, there's no way that I'm going to get this tile into the proper position. So it's very important when you're adjusting your rack that your aluminum rails fit completely inside the tile.
Oh, I had forgotten that one.
It's okay.
Other
than that, we want to move our suction cups into the best configuration to space them out relatively uniformly. Okay, we don't want 2 suction cups right together. We don't want a large section of this tile unsupported. Also, this suction cup is a little bit close to the edge, so by simply releasing these 2, I can move this rail, put this suction cup a little bit closer in so it's not right on the edge there.
Should there be a minimum distance between the suction cup edge and the edge of the tile itself?
I don't believe that there's a minimum distance, but I would say maybe 2 to 3 inches from the edge of the tile is a fairly good guideline. Okay?
Yeah.
Now that our rack is positioned correctly, actually I got to get this in. What we do is we can pump up our suction cups. Again, these suction cups are very nice. They have gauges on there. So by pumping the suction cups, you pump the suction cup until the gauge stops moving. It's going to be roughly 50 to 60 pounds of pressure. Once you achieve that, you can move on to the next suction cup. And pump that up. If at any point in time you're having trouble with this suction cup filling up, what we can do is we can release this quick release. That allows the suction cup to kind of form to any shapes or irregularities in the tile. Fill it up, and then we can reconnect the connect there.
So you basically want that gauge needle to be out of the red, right?
Correct. Anywhere out of the red is good.
And always check the pressure before you move the tile. Every single time before you move the tile, you check the pressure of every single suction cup. You don't want to have that bad surprise as you're moving the panel that one of the suction cups isn't engaged anymore. So it's very important to continuously check for good pressure.
Okay, Joe, I'm going to make a slight adjustment because I see over here our aluminum rail is outside of the tile here. So what I can do here, simply release this. This will allow me to adjust this rail so it's inside the tile. Then I can lock it back down and pump my suction cup back up.
I love these tools, and I've loved how much they've grown in the past 10 years. It's crazy.
Yes, they certainly have made a lot of improvements from the first generation.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we do a quick visual inspection to make sure that all of our suction cups are indeed pumped up. We make sure that all of our quick release tiles are locked down. Okay. Now our suction cup rack is installed. The next step is going to be to turn this tile upside down so we can start applying mortar to the back of the tile as well as to the substrate.
Typically, you'd have a set of sawhorses or something, but because we're working in a studio, we don't have that much space, so we're going to use the cutting table as the rack or the surface that we're going to be troweling the panel on. But typically, you'd have a set of sawhorses close to your substrate or close to where you're going to be installing the tile, where you can easily flip this upside down. It's a messy process. This way you don't get thin set all over your nice cutting table as well. So
in order to turn this tile upside down, we're actually going to use these crossbars, and we can actually use these as a structural component.
How far do I need to come out?
You just want to come out relatively even with me. So when I adjust these crossbars, I think of two things. Basically, I want these out far enough closer to the tile so that if it is unlevel, I don't have to worry about a corner of the tile hitting the ground. But I don't want them out so far that when I turn it vertical, I actually have to lift it up to set it down. So there is no number on that. It's going to be whatever's comfortable. You just want to kind of give it an eyeball and make sure that they're relatively equal. Okay. So now we're going to work as a team. We're going to count to 3, we're going to go. Our technique is going to be to slide it off. We'll slide it right on the table, and eventually the weight of the tile itself will start to get it vertical. Once it gets vertical, we'll rest it on the crossbars. That will allow us to switch our hands from this position to this position and allow us to turn the tile upside down and set it back on the table.
Yes, and always mirror what your partner is doing, right? If his hand is coming over here and this one over here, you have to mirror that as well, because otherwise you're going to twist your arms and it's just not going to work out well.
Okay, so on 1, 2, 3. Okay.
That's gravity doing the work. There we go. Switching hands. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. So these panels are heavy. The rack is not the lightest thing in the world, so this can be a little challenging. 2 people can easily do it. Depending on the size of the panel, if you're working with bigger panels, you may need an extra couple of hands. But then you also have to think that afterwards, this will have thin set on it, right? Or some kind of material, an LHT or a thin set. So typically, you know, bag of thin set's about 25 to 50 pounds plus the water. So you can easily add, you know, 60, 70 pounds to the weight of this panel and rack as you're transporting it.
Yes.
All right, so now, same thing, we're going to be applying, they're going to come out with thin set pretty quick. One thing that we always note again is that you can't bond to dust. So you take out your rag and you have to make sure these are clean. You can tell by my hand that these are very dirty when they come out of the manufacturing process. So you want to give them a good wipe down, make sure you have no dust, which is a bond breaker. And as Ryan mentioned earlier, just no standing water.
Yeah. And you can see Joe's doing a good job of supporting that tile with his offhand so that he's not, anywhere that he's applying pressure down, you want to make sure your offhand is supporting that tile so you don't break a tile during this process.
And that is true as well when you're troweling. That is one of my biggest pet peeve when I see installers doing this, and they'll be troweling or cleaning with just one hand, not doing anything. And I tell them, you've got two hands, make sure they're both busy doing something.
Yes,
Because
you always want to support that tile.
Yep, absolutely. This tile is pretty sturdy, but there are a lot of other tiles on there that are thinner and a lot more flimsy. And again, this is not a cheap material. You don't want to waste anything like that. So we are cleaning making sure this is nice and clean and ready for our thin set application. If you wouldn't mind doing the other half.
Absolutely.
So I would like to just talk about the installation materials real quick. So we're going to come out with our thin set. Today we're going to be using our 254 Platinum Plus, which is pretty much our Cadillac within Laticrete. It's a lightweight product, so instead of a 50-pound bag, within the same volume you get 25 pounds. So for these panel installation, using a lighter thin set makes your installation a lot easier. Properties that you're looking for in a thin set. Number one, thixotropic qualities. So it's the whole ketchup premise, right? If you turn the ketchup bottle over, nothing happens unless you start introducing vibrations to it and then it flows out. Same thing, we're going to be introducing vibration to take advantage of those thixotropic properties within the thin set to make sure we get proper coverage. As I mentioned earlier, you're looking for 85%. It can be challenging to achieve. Another physical property that is very important is open time. Robert here is going to trowel the panel, and he can probably do it very, very quickly, probably less than 10 minutes. But some people, you know, if you haven't done it a lot or if you're working with a partner, it can take 10 to 15 minutes to trowel the back of the tile and trowel your substrate as well. So having a long open time, and open time is how long the material stays good after you've actually troweled it out, is paramount. So 254 Platinum Plus gives you about an hour of open time at 70 degrees, which is fantastic for these installations. You're not rushing it, you can take your time, and you're still going to have a good thin set. How do you know if your thin set's kicked off? How do you know if it's not good anymore, if it's not usable? Simply just press your finger into it. If it transfers to your finger, you still have a usable thin set. But let's say it's a warm area, let's say you have a lot of wind if you're exterior or fans or something going on like that, and when you see the thin set start losing its sheen, that's when you can kind of tell that it's kicked off and maybe no good anymore. So press your finger into it. Some people can also, if you catch it on time, you can kind of retrowel the whole thing and bring back the mortar, again, taking advantage of those thixotropic properties. And that'll be good thin set. But if you let it go for too long, you have to remove the thin set from the entire tile, from your substrate. And we're talking a bag each, right? The coverage on these things is one whole bag. We'll do one panel for one panel and one whole bag on the floor in this particular case. If you're working with a larger panel, it might be a bag and a half on the back of the tile and a bag and a half on your substrate. So it's very important that you figure that out ahead of time. These products have a ton of chemistry into it. So mixing a modified mortar isn't just, you know, put your paddle into it, mix it for 30 seconds, and you're good to go. We actually like to have a 9-minute mix time. Basically, you mix your product for 2 minutes, right? There's a lot of chemicals, there's a lot of polymers into it, everything's got to get hydrated. After the 2-minute, you have what we call a 5-minute slake time, where you're basically just waiting for all that chemistry to get properly hydrated. After that 5-minute slake time, you re-whip it for another 2 minutes. So we like to say it's a 9-minute mix time. And it does hold a very important place within your installation, because since installing these panels can take a long time and stuff, it usually takes a whole crew. That crew takes coordination. So if you know that it takes 9 minutes to mix the thin set, once you get the panel on the table, you can tell your guys, hey, start mixing now. This way I can transport my panel, put it on the table, clean it, all that stuff. So that gets you a much more efficient installation time. So Robert, tell us what you're doing.
What we're doing right now is keying mortar into the substrate. So we poured mortar spread it out over the face of the tile, and then we're going to use the flat side of the trowel to actually key the mortar into the substrate. And what that does is that ensures that we're going to get a good transfer from the tile to the mortar, and then additionally onto our substrate once we do that. So once we get it keyed in, then we'll gauge out and start spreading, and then creating our our directional troweling to actually get it ready to adhere.
Yes. And again, talking about coordination and efficiency, typically I like to have my floor guy or substrate guy who's going to be prepping the substrate go first. Just because sometimes, especially on the wall, it takes a lot longer to actually trowel that out on a vertical surface than it does horizontal. So you kind of want to be done troweling your panel and your substrate at the same time. So depending on who you're working with, especially if you're familiar with them, you can know, how long it's going to take Baxter, for example, here to trowel this substrate versus Rob doing the panel. What you just saw here is Ryan, very well versed in his installations, actually introducing moisture to our substrate. This is a self-leveling underlayment. It is kind of a thirsty substrate, and you don't want your thin sets, basically you don't want the substrate to steal all the moisture from your thin sets. That might cause your thin sets to actually kick off quicker since that moisture is being absorbed into your substrate. So you want to wet it enough so that it's moist, but no standing water. Again, standing water is a bond breaking agent. So right here, I can see that there's a couple of puddles here.
Yes, I was a little bit heavy over there. But this is an important step, especially if you're going over any kind of self-leveling or pervious substrate, cement boards, anything like that. If you're going over a waterproof membrane or that's already waterproof, it's not as important. However, if you have any substrate that's going to be porous and can absorb water, it's very important that you introduce water to that substrate, surface saturation dry, where we have moisture in it, however, no standing water, just like Jill said.
All right, Robert, how are you doing?
Doing great. Now we're just gauging the mortar, kind of spreading it out to where we need it, and then we'll start working in and getting our directional trowel lines that we need to be able to put it, transfer it onto the floor.
So one thing that we like to mention too is that typically when you're doing these installations, it's always good for consistency's sake to have the same person trowel out your tile or trowel out your substrate. Robert is going to do his thing in a very consistent manner, but if you had 2 or 3 different people, they may hold their trowels at a different angle. And basically your trowel is a gauge for how much material you're putting either on your substrate or onto your tile. So holding your trowel at a 45-degree angle to maximize the amount of material you're putting down, and again, to make it as consistent as possible. Because if you were to have Robert do one side, and he's holding his trowel nice and tall, and then if I was to do this side, but I'm holding my trowel flat, there's going to be less material on this side than that side. That means that when I put my panel down, one side will be higher than the other, which could cause lippage issues. And at that point, that's very hard to remedy once you have the panel down on the floor. So it is very important to hold your trowel in a consistent manner, and Robert will demonstrate that in just a second. What do you think about the thin set, Robert?
Very light, very creamy. Which is exactly what you want, because I'm sure you guys talked about earlier, the weight of the panels is pretty substantial. Yep. And then you're going to have to move these things around. This panel, I think, ends up being about 40 inches by about 9 feet. They can go up to 5 feet by 10 feet, and that's substantial. So when you start talking about the amount of weight, it's about a bag and a half of thin set. Yep. For those 5 by 10 panels. So we'll be talking about 25 pounds of material versus 70 pounds of material onto the back of the tile. So
yeah, that makes a huge difference. One thing that you actually can see here right on our substrate is that we have multiple lines here. And basically the inside line represents the size of the panel that we're going to place on here. And then the outside line is what we call our spread line. One of the biggest things that we saw when we first started installing these panels was a lot of cracking around the edges and the corner. And that's because we were using regular installation methodology and it just wasn't working for this particular material. So we always want to overspread the panel just to properly support the corners and the edges of these tiles, because again, they are so large that any kind of flexibility in the corners or on the edges can potentially crack them. So that's why we have so many lines onto the substrate currently.
Yes, it's very, very important to not only chalk your layout lines, but to chalk your spread lines. Every panel has to be overspread by at least 1 inch on all 4 sides, and that's to ensure that you get that proper coverage all the way around the entire perimeter of that tile. The edges in the corner are going to be the fragile parts of these tiles. They're going to be weak spots. So it's very, very important that you overspread your mortar to ensure that you get those edges and corners of the tile supported.
Yes. One thing I'd like to mention, and Robert, if you could demonstrate for me, again, always use both of your hands, one hand to support the panel, one hand to trowel it out. And as you can see, Robert is doing this really well here. He's got a little bit of practice, but he's not just pulling his arm, right? When you're pulling your arm and you're bending your elbow, you're actually changing the angle of the trowel. So what he's doing is literally just shifting his foot backwards while keeping his elbow locked down. That gives him incredibly consistent trowel lines. They're nice and straight, and they go all the way to the edge. This is a little bit of a messy process. You don't want to stop short of the edge. You actually want to go past it to make sure that the edges are well troweled out for support. Another area that can be a little tricky are the corners. Always want to make sure that you have a proper amount of thin sets on all of your corners. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, these trowels are designed to go from right to left. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It works best when this trowel is used when you are keying the substrate into the mortar or gauging it on the beginning. You can do that in any pattern that you'd like. The most important part is get the mortar onto the tile as quickly as possible. When you come to do your final comb, that's when you want to start from the right-hand side and then work your way to the left. And that's going to give you nice, consistent, straight, full ridges that's going to really assist in that collapse.
Yes, and one thing I didn't mention, but you can notice, Robert is troweling basically 90 degrees from the long edge of the tile, which allows air to escape the system once you put the tile down. So as you can see here, our trowel marks are very straight. There are no V's or voids or anything like that that can trap air into it. Again, you're looking to avoid any voids, yeah, that's hard to say, over 2 inches square per square foot within the panel. So anytime you see your trowel marks nice and straight, you know that the air has a path to actually exit from underneath the panel as we put it down. And you can also see that Robert is working like on a center ridge here. That's very easily explained. I can't reach all the way to that panel. I'm sure some people can if they're tall enough. But because we don't have the ability to rake this whole tile in one shot, we are creating just a center ridge here that you can in some cases reproduce on your substrate as well. And that air is going to escape left to right as we install it, right? This installation is not going to be like a traditional installation where you can't step on the tile. As soon as we put this tile down, we're actually going to step on it and assist the air in getting out from underneath it to achieve proper 85% coverage and avoid any large voids underneath the tile. All right, and guys, again, remember, there's somebody answering questions live, so don't hesitate to get on there and ask as many questions as you can. I'm sure I'm not going to hit every talking point here, so if anything that I miss or that you wonder about, don't hesitate to ask. All right. Baxter, how are you doing, sir?
Doing good.
So as you can see, whatever Robert is doing on the tile, Baxter is going to reproduce on the floor. So right now he's still gauging how much material is going to go on, but eventually he's going to be matching the trowel marks that Robert has going on, so that when you marry the two, it's basically like a zipper system, right? Those trowels are designed to have self-collapsing ridges, if you will. So when you press it down, all those are going to marry together. We're going to introduce vibrations, make sure that we take advantage of those thixotropic properties and achieve the proper coverage.
It's also very important to note we no longer swirl with our trowels. Very straight lines, and the line should always go parallel to the short side of the tile.
Right, or perpendicular to the long side.
Yeah.
If I remember my geometry classes. All right, Robert, you're doing great, man.
All right.
Again, he has his wrist locked, his elbow locked, and his shoulder locked. He's just rocking his body. That ensures a proper trowel angle as well as nice, straight, full ridges all the way down the tile.
And if I was to install a normal tile, and I see all these mess right here in front of the tile, I would typically take my trowel and just clean it all up in one shot. If I were to do that, I would literally be closing out all the pathways for the air to escape. So you want to leave it messy, unfortunately. You can kind of go underneath it with a sponge and try to get anything that's hanging down, but you don't want to rack it up this way and close the pathways for the air to escape. That looks really good, Robert. So I'm going to inspect it, make sure there are no voids or possibility for voids. Everything looks troweled out really nicely. Yeah, awesome. Well done, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, are you checking pressures?
I am. I know that Baxter still has some work to do there, but
all right.
Start to get ready.
Yep. Do you want to help Baxter out?
Yes.
All right. So a lot of times it's a lot easier when you have two people on your substrate. Sometimes you can also have two people on your tile. But again, you're looking for consistency. There are a lot of variables that you can control, and the variables that you can control will ensure a successful installation. It's a very detail-oriented kind of installation, but you kind of have to get there. And again, we are doing all of this according to the installation standard, the ANSI A108.19. All right, getting more thin set onto the slab. So you can't really be too careful about how much thin set you're using. It's better to have too much thin set on your substrate or on your tile than not enough. Again, you're looking for 85% coverage. You want to overspread, support the edges, support the corners. And as Robert and Baxter are finishing up our substrate, it's like Ryan's getting ready to move the panel into position. So again, this is where if you're working with a consistent team, everybody gets a job and everybody consistently sticks to that job.
Crew size does matter. I often get that question, is how many guys is the correct number of guys per crew? The answer is that's going to vary a lot from job site to job site. I would say typically, especially when you're first started, if you have the room, I would say 4 to 5 guys would be appropriate. Mm-hmm. If you're in an upstairs bathroom, you're probably not going to get 5 guys into a small bathroom. Correct. So oftentimes it's going to be your job site that dictates the size of your crew. I will say, especially when you're starting, more guys as opposed to not enough. It's always easier to cut a guy off a job site than it is to add. So start with 5 guys if you can. And then once you get familiar with the process and the progress, you can adjust your crew size to the job site.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention, one of the biggest things about installing these panels is the logistics of everything. They're so big, they're so cumbersome that you kind of have to plan around it, right? So you have to plan where your working stations, your cutting stations are going to be, where your mixing stations can be. It's truly, I don't know how to explain it, but it takes a lot of teamwork, a lot of coordination to get this right. All right. Sorry, Ryan, it looks like we got a little bit of thin set on your table there.
That's all right. We'll be able to clean it up later.
All right.
And again, just like Joe was saying, the most important part about this job is going to be planning and prep. Make sure
More
you
adhesive right here.
Absolutely.
There should be some in this bucket back here. Should be a small amount.
Oh, I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
So it's important that you plan for every eventuality that you can. You should be in the planning phase from the minute that you get the plans, checking layout, know where your pallet of tile is going to be, know what problems you're going to have. Are you going to have a staircase that's going to be too tight to bring these panels up? Are there corners? How high? Do you need scaffolding? It's very, very important that you try to come up with every obstacle that you may encounter and have a plan to deal with that obstacle before you have the tile on the rack and then encounter the obstacle. It's important that you plan for every eventuality.
One thing I'd like to point out is the Fido that Baxter is holding in his hand. If you were to trowel the entire substrate without leaving a ridge in the middle, you could use that to support your weight and literally reach all the way across. Do you mind demonstrating that real quick? Sure. Thank you, sir. So again, he can put that Fido right into the thin set. We can clean that up real quick. And that gives him the ability to literally reach across the entire substrate and trowel it out. Actually, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, Robert and I were doing a training in Oregon, and we had this gentleman from Russia who was very, very tall, And he literally was doing one-hand push-ups while troweling the entire substrate. He did not need a FIDO. He is the only person I've ever seen having the ability to do that. Nice.
I need this a little bit more there.
Baxter, what did you think about the 254 Platinum Plus?
I love it. It's mixes easy, spreads easy,
Nice and creamy.
nice and creamy.
Yeah.
The work time is great.
Yep. Yeah, the pot life is about 4 hours on 254 Platinum Plus. Again, it's thixotropic thin set. It meets ANSI A118.15, so it's a high performance modified thin set. And the fact that it's lightweight makes it easier to mix, easier to transport, easier to trowel out. It just makes it a lot easier on the installer's bodies. So whenever I'm doing any of these trainings, and we do probably 10 or 12 a year across the country, that's the thin set I'm always working with. That's my absolute favorite. It's consistent. It trowels out super nice, long open time, long pot life. And if you're working, for hours on end, and let's say you've had that bucket open and you've been working out of it for a couple hours, it may stiffen up on you. At that point, a lot of people want to add more water to it, re-whip it, and go with it. With these particular materials, you don't need to do that. All you need to do is re-whip it. Again, you reactivate it, taking advantage of those properties, and the thin set will be good for about 4 hours in the bucket. So it's got long pot life, long open time, ease of use, very creamy. It's a pleasure to trowel out. Great material to install these panels. But again, you can also use Multi-Max Light, 4XLT. There's a bunch of materials that we can recommend with these panels. Well done, gentlemen. Looks good. All right, looks like it's time.
Okay, looks like it's time. So as you can see, while they were finished up trowel, I don't know, but if you notice in the background, I was going underneath here and just making sure, verifying that each suction cup is still pumped up, has a proper amount of pressure. The other nice thing about this rack, you can see, whereas before these crossbars were out the other way, I was able to move them out this way. So now what we're going to do is pick this tile up, get it vertical again, switch our hands, come over here. Jill and I are going to hover right at the end with the tile just a few inches above the mortar. And when we go to embed this tile, we want all points of the tile to touch the mortar at the same time. We don't want to put one edge in and roll it down. We want all points to touch at the same time.
If you were to roll that panel down, as Ryan just mentioned, you're going to push thin set around, and one side of the tile will be lower than the other. The Lippage tolerance is pretty much like any other tile. You're looking at a 32nd of an inch. That means that the height of one tile next to the other has to be about the thickness of a credit card, not any more than that. So again, that's why you're using self-leveling underlayments, trying to your best to get the flattest possible substrate, again 1/8 and 10, to avoid those lippage issues. Because once you have those lippage issues, it's a tripping hazard, and most likely you'll have to remove that tile and redo the whole thing. So it's very important that you try to do it right the first time. All right. Ready to go?
Yes, I want to just pull this out just
Sure.
a little bit further, make it a little bit more level. Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
One, two, three. Okay. Vertical.
Okay. Ooh. One,
Ready?
2, 3. There we go. All right, so I'm going to line mine up according to my trowel marks. Here we go. So I'm just hovering here a couple inches.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm going to
pretty
count it
good over
down
here.
on 3.
Yep.
1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. So if this was a regular tile installation, this is when you get off the tile and you leave it for about 24 hours before you actually step on it. But Ryan's going to go right to it and start what we call walking the panel in. So what you start with is that Ryan's going to step right into the middle of the panel. And a lot of people think, oh, let's get the biggest guy on the crew to do this, but it's not really about being the biggest guy, it's about point load. So sometimes having the smallest feet will give you the biggest point load and will allow you to get more pressure. But as he's walking it in, which is about a 6 to 8 minute process, he's basically taking baby steps up and down that spine, excuse me. He's walking up and down that spine that we created. essentially pushing the air out to the edges. And once he's done walking in the spine, we're going to remove the suction cup rack, and then we're going to vibrate all the sides in.
And so when I'm walking this in, I like to go about a half a step forward and then I match it. So about a half a step and then match. And now as I encounter this suction cup, I'll reach down and release the pressure on that as I step over it. Also, please note, I stay about a good 4 to 6 inches away from each end. I don't want to put that much pressure onto the edge of the tile, so I'll stay about 6 inches from the end. Once that center spine is in, we can release all the suction cups.
Now, Ryan, if I were to realize, as I'm doing now, that we are off on this corner here, the tile is in there, but you can kind of push the rack around to kind of get the tile in place.
Right. Once the tile is in the thin set, you can make micro adjustments. Remember, it's micro adjustments. You really want to place this tile in the correct position right away. However, if you are off an 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, you can make micro adjustments. It's important that you're moving the tile parallel to the substrate. You don't want to push down. And again, we're going to take advantage of that thixotropic nature of that mortar. And instead of trying to push, we'll kind of try to vibrate that tile over.
Gotcha. Now the thin set is pretty fresh underneath there. You know, if you were to install a second panel, you'd basically have to walk onto this one to get to the next one. So you have about an hour really to walk onto this panel. If you wait too long, if you go past that hour, that thin set has already started to dry and to cure. So you could break that bond, and at that point you can't get it back. But you have a whole hour to step all over the panel, doing whatever you need to do to get your installation going.
Why don't we just set this rack right on the tables here?
Sure. I think, are they all released? Oh, yeah.
Oh, they're all released?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There we go.
We'll just set this right here until we're done walking it in.
Sounds good.
So now I've walked in the center spine and our suction cup rack is off, so now I can continue to walk this in. So I'm going to step back on right into my center spine, and now I'm going to start pushing the air from the center out to the sides. Now I do that by going the width of my foot and again then match. Width of my foot and match. Making sure that I cover every square inch of the tile, and again staying about 4 to 6 inches to the end. Once I get to this outside, I'll come back to the center and go the other way.
It is not a process that you can skip. It is not something that you can kind of speed up. You have to kind of take your time and make sure you're doing it the right way. And you can see thin set oozing out from underneath that panel. And when I see that thin set coming out on the edges, I know that the air has gotten out. I'm getting my coverage, right? Again, not to be repetitive, but you're looking for 85% on the floor. So that's, for such a large panel, it is difficult to achieve. And once Ryan is done stepping or walking the panel in, that's when we'll break out the vibrating tool, take advantage of, again, of those thixotropic properties. That's probably a word we've said way too much today, but that'll get you the coverage you're looking for, the support you're looking for. If you're not getting the edges, the corners supported, if you don't have the right amount of coverage, again, you're cracking the tile, and this is, 4x9, so that's 36 square feet you have to replace, as opposed to a 24-inch tile, which is fairly easy to do. So it is very important to do this. Take your time. Again, typically the same guy on the same crew is going to be doing this, so it's consistent. It's a variable you can easily control and install it the correct way. Do it once and do it right.
It's very important to note that once I get to the outside, I always come back to the center before I step forward. Okay.
And I can see that this floor is not flat, so that edge is just not wanting to lay down.
Yes, this is a temporary substrate.
Yes. So we actually poured this substrate in a different space that was apparently flatter than this particular area, and we slid it back into place, so that's why it's not incredibly flat.
So again, as I go to the outside, it's very important that once I get to the outside, I come back to the center. If I were to step forward here, I would collapse this pocket right here, and I would trap all this air from the center to where my foot is. So it's very important to come back to the center and then step forward.
Yep, you're doing a great job. You can also do this at weddings, any kind of parties or anything like that. We call it the Tileman's Shuffle. All right, And again, I'd like to remind everybody, there is a live Q&A happening right now, so if you have questions about this process, don't hesitate to ask any questions you may have. It is, installing one panel can take half an hour to 40 minutes. Once you have a crew that knows what they're doing, you can cut that time down to 20 minutes or less sometimes, but it is a time-consuming, it is a messy process, and you kind of have to go along with it, right? But this is a very specific installation. It took years to get this correct, a lot of trial and error. When we first got these panels in this country, I was just starting my time in the industry myself, so about 13, 14 years ago. And we were going with the same methodology that we would for a 24 by 12 tile. It was, square notch trowel, a ½ inch. We would just back butter everything, and it just wasn't working. We had failure after failure, and some very dedicated people sat down for months at a time to try and figure this out. And they used plexiglass panels so that they could see how the thin set would react, what kind of coverage they were getting, and they tried hundreds of different methodology. But this came down to this. This is the right way to do this. This has been a proven way. And I'm not sure what year the standard came out. I think it was 2017 maybe? Maybe before that even.
I think they started then, but I think it was actually just a couple of years it's been written in the ANSI standard.
Yeah, so.
It's also important to note to take your time. While each tile can take somewhere between 20 to 40 minutes, if you look, it's a 4 foot by 9 foot tile. So you're putting down a lot of square footage in that amount of time.
Yes. One thing I'd like to note too is that you have thin set, this mess of a thin set on this edge. And again, somebody with a regular, tile installation practices would just simply rack that all up. There you would be closing out the airways for the air to get out. So you want to just cut it. You basically take your trowel, throw it down, and then pull it away. That keeps the pathways open, and this way you can clean up your thin set.
Okay. Now that I've walked in the entire interior of this tile, it's time to embed the edges using the vibration tool. So I'm going to step onto the tile. And again, I'm going to work with my ridges. So I'm going to start here and work to the outside, and then I'm going to come up. I'm putting a bit of downward pressure on here because I want to make sure that I transfer this vibration into the mortar to make sure that I get that full coverage.
There you go. So again, this is to, and we've said it too many times, but you're just taking advantage of those physical properties so that your bottom layer and the top layer of thin set marry into one another, creating a monolithic slab underneath it. Now Ryan, if you were to install a panel on my side, you would only vibrate the 3 edges, correct?
That is correct. So you do have to vibrate all 4 edges of every tile that you would install. However, if we were to continue installing this way, I would wait for this panel to be installed, and then I can vibrate these 2 edges together. And while I'm vibrating them, I can make sure they get the coverage, but also make sure that the panels are nice and flat, and I can remove any lippage that those panels might have at that time.
Correct. Yep. All right. Well, this is the installation of a panel. I'm not sure if I've forgotten anything. I'm sure you guys will tell me if I have forgotten anything. Otherwise, please ask Tyler in the live Q&A. But that's, I think that's it for me.
I think so.
All right.
Again, there's the live Q&A, so please don't hesitate to ask any questions.
Yep, and thank you so much, guys, for showing up today. We really appreciate your time, and we hope we've entertained you at least a little bit.